it's amazing, really. We weren't planning to speak on Psalms, and then somehow we kind of ended up speaking on Psalms. It just feels like, okay, Lord, so you know what you're doing more than we do, which is a very good job. I want to talk to you about the pain of the gap. The pain of the gap. And the reality is that this book, our book, if you're a Christian, this is your book. This is our story. This is where we live. This tells us what's what. If you're not a Christian, we love it that you're here. You're so welcome. We hope you feel at home in our community. We want you to learn and love this book. It's the best book. It begins in Genesis 1, and I'm just going to frame it, calling it Genesis 1 and 2. And we've got a little slide, hopefully. The world is a world that is good. In fact, it's very good. There's no pain, there's no death, there's no suffering, there's joy, there's shalom in every space. It's a good world. And there's a shift that occurs, which we won't go into detail, but it's the fall, it's Adam and Eve's sin, and we see that what happens is, on the next slide, Gabriel, thank you so much, is that there's a drop in the experience of the earth. And what happens is that all kinds of stuff that shouldn't be happening and was never intended to happen begins to happen. And it's sin, it's selfishness, it's Cain killing Abel, it's greed, it's mistreatment of women by men, it's mistreatment of one race by another race, it's all these kind of things, and in the midst of it all is death. It's a gap. And if you see what happens is the experience of humanity, just next slide, is that we continue to have a flavour, a taste. There's something within us that knows what it should be like. Even though we weren't there, we remember the Genesis 1 and 2 reality. And it's just this sense that we reach for this and want this, and we feel like this is how it should be. And there's a gap. There's a gap between our lived experience, the Genesis 4, the Genesis 3 and 4 reality, and what we want it to be. And that gap is filled with pain. It's the pain of the gap. And this pain is expressed with language that is rich and varied. There's no simplicity in the Bible. It's brutally honest, and many different voices express it in many different ways. Cain says, "My punishment is too great for me. I shall be a restless wanderer. Nowhere to call home." For him, the gap was, I have nowhere to call home. I constantly feel like I'm restless, I'm wandering. There's a gap, the pain of the gap. It's a restless wanderer. Some of you feel like you're a restless wanderer. You just feel like you have nowhere to call your home. It's the pain of the gap. Jacob, a man who lost his sons, their feuding wives. At the end of his life, one of the kind of funny lines is, Joseph has got in with Pharaoh, who's the greatest ruler on the earth, and he introduces his dad eventually to Pharaoh, and you know those moments where you don't want your dad to embarrass you, and his dad comes in and says, "The years of my pilgrimage have been long and hard," and you're like, "Dad, couldn't you have started with something better than that?" But in it, he sums up the reality of the pain of the gap. The years of my pilgrimage have been long and very hard. Moses, he cries out to the Lord. There's a cry, there's a reality of a cry of being in slavery. Some of you know what it's like to be in slavery. You have to make bricks without straw. It's hard. There's a frustration, there's a challenge, poverty, and others taking your work and getting benefit from it, and you don't get it. It's the pain of the gap. And as he looks back on his life, he describes his journey through the wilderness, and he describes it in this way. He says, the vast and terrible desert. That's where I lived. The vast and terrible desert. Some of you feel like you live in a vast and terrible desert. Hannah, she wept over her barrenness. She wanted a child, she couldn't have a child. Barrenness is just over and over again a lived metaphor of the gap, the pain of the gap. She's misunderstood by her husband, who says, "Well, aren't I good enough for you? You know, you didn't need kids." He just didn't get it. He didn't get it. And the priest said, "You must be drunk, woman," and rebuked her. The pain of the gap. Some of you feel that. Koheleth, The teacher is one of several wisdom literature things written about this gap, this pain. He calls it hevel, which means meaninglessness. He kind of looks and it's like, in this Genesis 3 and ongoing reality, there's a meaninglessness. Good people die young. Bad people live long and get rich. What's it all about? I wonder if you know what this pain feels like. I wonder if you know. You know, all week there's a billboard which I've been passing, which is an advert for McDonald's, the Steakhouse Stack. Have you seen this? And it's massive, and it looks so delicious. And you pass it and you think to yourself, yes, this has got to be the greatest thing I could ever purchase. And it can't be very expensive because it's at McDonald's. And all week we were in Nottingham at a leadership conference, and on the way home we stopped at McDonald's. And I said, I shall have that Steakhouse Stack. And they brought it to the table. And even before I'd opened the box, I looked and thought, that box is far smaller than I hoped it would be. And as I opened up the box, I just thought, it's just a Big Mac with a slightly different sauce and a fancy name. There was a pain in the gap. I wonder if you know what it feels like. For much in our culture, the pain of the gap feels like Adele. Feels like Adele. I wonder if you know Adele's lyrics. One of her sort of really breakout lyrics was this: never mind, I'll find someone like you. I wish nothing but the best for you two. Don't forget me, I beg. I'll remember, you said. Sometimes it lasts in love, but sometimes it hurts instead. And just the lyrics, the sound of what she says and does, it captures that sense of the pain of the gap. A lesser-known song that she said, I have nothing to feel no more, I can't even cry. When will I begin to feel like me again? I'm hanging by a thread. My skin's paper thin, I can't stop wavering. I've never been more scared. See, music has a powerful reality to it that enables it to express this sense that you can't quite put into words. For many, Sam Cooke seemed to sum up what it was to live in the gap. He said this, he sung this in fact, I was born by the river in a little tent. Oh, and just like the river, I've been running ever since. I go to my brother and I say, brother, help me please. But he winds up knocking me back down on my knees. Oh, there's been times I thought it couldn't last for long, but now I think I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is going to come. Oh, yes, it will. See, there's just a pain in this gap, and we find things to fill it. We find ways to kind of engage with it. And the reality is that this, for many people, the only obvious solution is just to become numb. We become numb to the reality of the struggle and pain that there is in this earth. We choose not to feel, because if we do feel, it's too hard. And so we choose not to feel. We follow the Lady Gaga route, and we say, poker face. We say, you can do what you want to my body. I just detach from the reality of this Genesis 3 and 4 existence. Others distract from it through busyness. We kind of come up with a solution that actually, let's just say there is no Genesis 1 and 2. Let's just forget that. That seems to in some way solve the problem. We just live right now, we'll just be busy right now, just focus on this stuff right now. I don't know if you've seen a documentary called KSI in Real Life. My kids started watching KSI and I thought, I need to find out who this person is. I think he's a remarkable man, actually. Incredible guy. Incredibly creative and talented. Works extremely hard. But what he basically says is it's a very confessional piece. Is it on Prime? KSI in real life. Have you heard of KSI?
No.
Yeah, you know how I'm talking about?
Nope.
And he basically just said that the reality is he was a big YouTuber and is now in many different industries. I just got myself as busy as possible just to distract myself from the pain I feel. And many of us do that. As busy as possible. Others get angry and turn it into bitterness. You're like, I can't close this gap, but what I could maybe do is just drag some who are feel slightly higher up, their circumstances are slightly better than me, drag them down, and I'll try and flip my position with them. Understandable. Leads to bitterness. Well, I've got some good news. God pours songs of his unfailing love into this gap. The Psalms are the gift of God to Israel to say, I see this pain and I pour these songs in. I provide you with 150 songs where you can find me and meet with me. They're lyrics to lean on. They're pathways to the Prince of Peace. They're space where you find solidarity with the Saviour. The Psalms are God's gift into the pain of the gap. They were corporate affairs of a marginalised and suffering people. Sometimes they were written when the Amalekites had raided, sometimes when there was a sense of barrenness, sometimes when there was a failed harvest, sometimes when families were feuding, sometimes when there was the death of a loved friend or family member, sometimes betrayal, sometimes sin. In the midst of this all, God provided the Psalms. He looked at his people and said, I see this pain. I provide you with Scripture and the Psalms. Use these to find me. They don't deny the reality of the gap, but they become like furniture that you use and sit on in the midst of the pain and the struggling. I wonder if you've ever been somewhere where you were on holiday or in somebody's house and you didn't know where the furniture was in the room. You ever done that? You kind of and then somehow it's pitch black. Like, so the joke would be you go to somebody's downstairs toilet and you close the door and then you're suddenly like, I can't see a thing, and you're trying to find where the light switch is to switch it on. Or maybe I remember recently, I can't remember where we were, but we were away and I woke up at night and you kind of move around the room to try and make sure that you don't bang into something. And in pain, it's like the lights go out and you're just desperate to find the furniture. Where can I sit? Where can I rest? How do I navigate through this space? And the Psalms become furniture for you. They give you the ways that you get through the days and find the Lord and actually find hope. Remember, the Lord is my... It's a great psalm, Psalm 23. Remember, shout for joy to the Lord, all the... It's a great psalm, Psalm 100. Today we have this psalm. My God, why have you forsaken me? Psalm 22. You see, the thing that's incredible about the Psalms is the Psalms give you words, not for the good moments alone, but for some of your worst moments. The Psalms give you furniture to sit on and to stand near at the point where you feel most bereft, most forlorn, where there is no easy answer, maybe no answer. The Psalm steps in and says, why don't you use me today? Why don't you speak my words today? It's a gift from God. So it's like groaning for the light to be switched on. As the Psalms become the way of the oil of the unfailing love of the Lord is poured into the chasm of your brokenness. And just like any liquid, where does it end up? At the lowest point. At the least easy, accessible place. The love of God comes to you through the Psalms. And so this is the psalm that we're invited to look at. My God, my God. You see, what God says to you in your suffering and in the pain of the gap is always make it personal. He demands that you don't break the possessive pronoun that he has given you. My God. No matter what questions, no matter what pain, he says, still call me my God. Do not break the possessive pronoun. If you work through the Old Testament, you'll find you always know when somebody's number's up because they start saying, your God did this. Saul starts saying that. Your God did this. Say, my God. But he's very kind because he says it twice. Because he recognizes and acknowledges the battle that you may feel in this moment to say, my God. It's not easy. It's not kind of just, blasé. I'll just say my God. No, it's like, my God. My God. You fight for the possessive pronoun. He calls you into it. And there's an element of yielding to him in this. This is why the Psalms are beautiful. You may not be able to say it in your own sense, but as you look at it and read it, you realize, I can repeat the words that are written for me on the page. My God, my God. The words win a battle for you that maybe your own will could not win. They take you to the right place. Why have you forsaken me? God's strategy is for you not to be numb to the reality of your feelings, not to distract from them, not to be angry about them. He equips you with words for them. He calls you into speaking the deep questions your heart must be feeling. Forsaken. Is there a more horrible word? Is there a more horrible word? Forsaken. You know what forsaken? It's like, you were meant to act for my sake, but you haven't. Have you forgotten me? Forsaken. Have you forgotten me? Have you forgotten the promises you made? As we deal with the reality of the death of Duncan, we might say, Lord, did you forget him? Did you forget Keris or Alistair or Jane? Did you forget? Have you forsaken? It's that sense of, oh God, like how can this be? It takes you and sums up the worst and the darkest things that could be present. And it gives us language for it. Maybe you knew Duncan and maybe you didn't. If you didn't know him, times like this, no doubt, and even if you did know him, no doubt bring up, it's called layers of loss, like other things, other losses, other grief, people you've known, people you've loved, things you've gone through. It comes up, that word forsaken. It's an awful word, but it's a powerful word. And the Psalms say this to you. Let's get language to describe that most awful thing. Let's not hide behind generalities. Let's not make theories. Let's just say you. Where are you? It's very easy in these moments to make it into, well, why does God let these things happen? And the Psalm says, no, what about you? Where are you? Where are you today? Where do you feel forsaken? Personalize it. Take that thing to your God. Now you can be strong for others in public or not strong for others in public. Both of those are totally fine. But don't use I need to be strong as an excuse to actually avoid the reality of what's inside, because it will come out in the end. So you use the Psalms to say, God, the gap is ravaging me in this way. My God, the pain of the gap is hitting me in this way. Past the theory, past the general big questions, your specific question deep in your heart. And we use the Psalms to lay out our personal pain before our personal God. Unfailing love is found when we follow their way to putting our trust in him. They become like furniture, where we take our personal questions to our personal God. And as we do that, somehow as you sit on that piece of furniture, as you rest on that particular thing, somehow, and it shouldn't happen, but it does happen because of his kindness, the unfailing love of God meets us in that place. So listen, what we're going to do is I'm just going to invite some of the musicians to come up, and we're going to actually just use this Psalm 22 as a moment to embrace the wisdom that the Lord has given us. The words for Psalm 22 is going to appear on the screen, and you don't have to do this, but I just invite you to do this. They're just going to give us a bit of the lament, the soulful sort of musical space, and we're just going to read these words before the Lord. We're going to say it as best we're able. And it's my prayer that this becomes for you that personal moment with your personal God, where you can say, Lord, here am I. And the words will be furniture. So they're just going to hum for us, I think, in the background. Let's say together, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? So far from my cries of anguish? My God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer. By night, but I find no rest. Yes, you are enthroned as the Holy One. You are the one Israel praises. In you our ancestors put their trust. They trusted and you delivered. To you they cried out and were saved. In you they trusted and were not put to shame. But I am a worm and not a man, scorned by everyone, despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord, they say. Let the Lord rescue him. Let him deliver him, since he delights in him. Yet you brought me out of the womb. You made me trust in you, even at my mother's breast. From birth I was cast on you. From my mother's womb you have been my God. Do not be far from me, for trouble is near, and there is no one to help. Many bulls surround me, strong bulls of Bashan encircle me. Roaring lions that tear their prey open their mouths wide against me. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned to wax, it has melted within me. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You, in the dust of death. Dogs surround me, a pack of villains encircles me. They pierce my hands and my feet. All my bones are on display. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garments. But you, Lord, do not be far from me. You are my strength. Come quickly to help me. Deliver me from the sword, my precious life from the power of the dogs. Rescue me from the mouth of the lions. Save me from the horns of the wild oxen. We lay ourselves before you, our God. Thank you for the Psalms. We thank you, God, that you love us as human beings in the midst Thank you so much. So, just to try and land this, Jesus comes to embody the Psalms. The Psalms are provision, and then Jesus comes as like a living manifestation of the ministry of the Psalms. He found a crowd of hungry people and he said, I'm the good shepherd. He took some struggling fishermen. He said he would make them fishers of men. Ones who would shout for joy to the Lord until all the earth came to join in. He told a dinner of rejects and sinners that he came to seek and save the lost. He told the lame and the paralyzed that he came not for the healthy, but those who are sick. He found people at the lowest and he said, let me bring to you the unfailing love of Jesus, the unfailing love of God. The ministry that the Psalms had to do, Jesus came in person to do. He comes into the gap and he brings his pain. He poured out mercy. And then he dies. And Psalm 22, of course, for most of us, we already know, this is the psalm he quotes on the cross. This is the psalm where Jesus says, I go to that place. And if you think of it like this, if the stage was to represent for us Genesis 1 and 2, the way the world we would love it to be, the way the world will be when God does everything that he desires to do, when he comes and renews all things. And this level that we're on represents the earth as Genesis 3 and 4 and onwards. The beauty of the cross as it comes on our level. Jesus comes here and he dies here in the Genesis 3 and 4 world. And the mystery and the beauty of the cross is this. I don't know if you know, but your whole life and your death are still going to take place on this level. This age we never get. We never get up there in this age. You live and you die here. But the cross says this. Somehow through the cross, the love and the beauty and the blessing and the goodness that is present in this version of the world flows somehow through the cross into this space. Now, many of us know that Duncan, I think, if I may say, the best preach he gave was on Psalm 22. He gave a lot of good ones. Do you remember he spoke about the worm? I'm a worm and not a man, and I'd never heard it before, but there was a worm that apparently used to give birth by climbing up a tree and dying on the tree. And as it died on the tree, it would give birth to its young. And he's like, Jesus is the worm who dies on the tree to give birth to his young, to people who will be like Jesus. And I think if we were to really consider what it is to accept, to truly accept that my life is not about me asking God to help me. God, would you just get me up on here? But to say, I'm going to live in this space. I'm going to accept that this is the reality. But God, would you use me as one of your young? That you died here, that I could be born here. And I can minister the ministry of the Psalms to any hurting, any bereft, any who are forsaken in this space. I think Duncan would cheer us on. And I think the Lord would say, yes, that is what this whole thing is about. We're people who carry the first fruits of that age by the Spirit from the cross. And we find the sick, and we find the hurting, and we find the lonely, and we find those who feel forsaken. And we say, the unfailing love of God can meet you in this space. Duncan did two things that I just think are beautiful things. The first one was that he helped curate a space we called Got Questions. He went and found people who thought they weren't allowed to say, my God, why have you forsaken me? And he said, no, we can go right to the bottom of that if you want. Because the unfailing love of God finds you where you feel forsaken. So let's discuss those questions. I just think it would be a wonderful thing. It would be the ministry of Jesus if we find the people around us who've got big questions and we don't quiet them and we don't give them pat answers, but we say, let's stand alongside you and let's listen. And let me give you a few ideas, but let me love you in this place. The second thing that he and Kerry's, I think, have done at nearly every one of them is to sit and eat with sinners. We call it a bring and share lunch. We're all sinners. You know, all of us are people who have got things that are not right. What do we choose to do? Do we choose to pick fault? Do we choose to say, I'd rather do something, eat on my own? Or do we eat with sinners? Do we choose to be with people who are feeling the pain of the gap and to do what we can? To say, do you know what? I'm going to seek to bring the unfailing love of Jesus to you, where you are. Because his unfailing love is the only way out of this reality, this existence, this flaw. The only way out is his unfailing love. And it's never failed anyone. And in a day, and theologically Duncan's either experiencing it totally already, or he's so fast asleep that he's getting totally oblivious to the fact that he hasn't experienced it yet, but the first second he opens his eyes, his groaning will be gone. The pain will be done. And that's what we'll have. So we can suffer anything, give anything, pay any price now, that others get that as well. I'm going to invite the worship team back and we're going to do some more worship. I'm going to invite the Lord to move among us. It's a heavy day. If you're a guest and this is your first day, I know it's a heavy day. I know it's a heavy day. But this is life. This is life. We can't apologise.